Call the roll, please.
Mrs. De Silva,
Here.
Mrs. Messick,
Here.
Mrs. Rigby,
Here.
Mr. Valentine,
Here.
and Mrs. Gillis.
Here. And Pledge of Allegiance. Approval of agenda as presented. Is there a motion?
So moved.
So moved by Mrs. Rigby. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. De Silva. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Rigby,
Yes.
Mrs. De Silva,
Yes.
Mrs. Messick,
Yes.
Mr. Valentine,
Yes.
and Mrs. Gillis.
Yes, motion passes 5-0. Moving forward with public participation.
Of course, I'm going to come right to my friends.
We're up already.
You're up already. All right. What do you got?
All right, I don't think I need it. You're right here. I want to follow up a little more on social emotional learning.
Yes, sir.
What form we use here. Do we contract with a company to provide those services to us? How long has it been here? I'm just trying to get my arms more around everything I study about it. I don't like.
Okay.
And I'm just trying to, but I don't understand how we do it here.
Okay.
I don't know how much time it takes out of a classroom's day. And I'd just like to have, general conversation about that.
Chris, Jen, Lori, do you want to help me out?
Yeah,
Do you
I'll help.
Yeah, because we're talking teaching and learning, and we're talking student services.
So we don't have a specific curriculum for social emotional learning.
Okay.
We were talking actually as a team Wednesday about how our support for students really does come teacher to student, school to student, like the overall care for our students. However, there are times that a student might be in a mental health crisis, or when we talk about social emotional learning, talking about how students interact with one another. So that's where things come in, like Chris has talked about, like our Hope Squad. If a student is in significant mental health crisis, then we have a lot of structures in place. But, all of what we do is social emotional learning. Think about the 5-year-old that goes out to the playground and fights over a hopscotch court. And they push one another, they shove one another, teacher intervenes and says, okay, what happened? Let's work through that. How would a better way to have handled that been? All the way up to seniors when they might not really understand where they fit in the world, or they're working to decide where to go to college, or whether to go into the workforce, or whether to continue with their education in some other way. Military enlistment, for example. So I realize I'm being vague, but that's because that's really what it is.
We don't pay for a specific
We don't
social
pay for a
emotional
specific-
program
Nope.
or any of
No.
those things.
Tassel, castle, those terms.
CASTLE's an organization
Right.
that has done a lot of research and provides information and support. There are programs that our teachers do access from time to time to get the ideas on lessons that they might use, or that our counselors use to implement the things that you'll find in the school counselor framework when they go into the classroom and work with kids on building relationships, responding to adversity, things like programs called Character Strong, or I think 7 Mindsets, or things like that, where teachers look for ideas to be able to implement things with fidelity with their students. So I know that our board has never adopted the Ohio Department of Education SEL standards.
I was going to ask that.
Yeah, we never did, but we know that we don't just teach content, we teach children how to interact and engage with one another, and hopefully that's when we talk about sense of belonging, providing opportunities for kids to engage with each other so they do feel that connection here. Kids who feel connected to school learn better and have better opportunities for success.
Let me give you 2 other things, and I'm going to give you these because the board got these tonight.
Okay.
there are a lot of resources out there that people purchase for use in their schools. And if you're in a school that doesn't have the talent that we have, you have to go purchase things. That safety and wellness playbook has all of our terms. There are people or districts that have to go purchase that type of resource. We build it ourselves. There's an athletic playbook there that talks about how we expect our students to act, how we expect our coaches to act and behave. And now there's a new section, how we expect our parents and spectators to behave. Those are based on our core values that we developed in-house. So a lot of what we do when it comes to how do we teach students discipline, how do we teach students the skills to self-regulate, how do we teach students to be the best version of themselves, we build ourselves. And we may use outside resources to spur ideas, but those two documents were created by Dublin teachers and Dublin staff, with Cassie and her team doing some of the graphics. But we make it Dublin because our standards are generally higher than what a cookie cutter product that could be purchased by somebody else would be.
And those cookie cutter products would ask you to have math, science, social studies, SEL, what am I forgetting?
Science.
Science, thank you, as its specific subject. We believe it's embedded in the relationships with our teachers, are the relationships that we develop with our kids and our parents. So it's not its own standalone class or curriculum.
Okay, because I'm reading about certain school systems, they devote a certain amount of time to it every day.
Yeah.
And you're telling me we don't do that?
No.
Now we've got students here, not a pull-out class. You don't have a SEL class. No.
No, they were just talking about taking 40 minutes out of the day and sitting people in a group setting and going around the room and talking about your feelings and all that sort of thing. We don't do that.
Not generally, no, we do not.
I mean, I understand if a teacher is interacting with somebody that's got a problem.
Yeah, that happens.
And
That's,
our elementary schools have taken our R-factor work, the E plus R equals O, and they've made it their own in the elementary. And there's pause, and it's how different schools have developed them into, but really it's character traits that we want all of our students to have. We want all of our students to take responsibility. We want all of our students to be disciplined. It's stuff we've taught forever in public
I was
schools.
going to say that.
Yeah, it's nothing new. Yeah.
Yeah, those,
Why do we use the label social emotional learning?
where and when?
Well, I think
I
this.
don't know, do you?
Yeah, I think if the term became more utilized in the last 10 years when we saw a spike in mental health problems in our young people. And whenever there's a problem in our society, you look at the schools, right? What are our kids learning? And so we talked about sense of belonging. And what we mean by that is if a kid comes to school and feels like no one sees him, no one cares about him, no one talks to him, no one even knows his name, that's a problem. Because that student will, may grow apathetic, may grow angry, may show behavior or lack of engagement in school. So we do work on that. We say to teachers, do you know your kids? Can you pronounce their names? Have you reached out to their parents when they're struggling? So we do want a really strong home-school connection. So that term, social emotional learning, became, Chris, when did it really?
About COVID.
COVID, yeah, I would agree. And then the state said, okay, we're gonna write these SEL standards. And, for a lot of districts, that was was very much appreciated because they didn't have it before. They weren't necessarily focusing on that. We had been for quite some time. We want our teachers to connect with their students, and they do. So I don't think it's, like many districts, we had to adopt anything or make a big splash. We just kept doing what we've always been doing.
We are also extremely fortunate, and Donna just walked in. Our teachers have been here for a long time. We have an experienced teaching staff. And with an experienced teaching staff, a lot of them have seen all of these ebbs and flows in education, and they just teach. And when we hire new teachers to replace those who retire, their assigned mentors who are able to provide assistance and support. Our greatest resource here are the people in the classrooms. As I've said, I don't teach a single kid. The magic happens in the classrooms, and we're blessed with a very stable staff, and we get to hire the best. Jen was at a meeting today where there were reps from all over the state, and she came back, she said, we're so fortunate because they can't hire teachers in some parts of Ohio. There aren't reading specialists. There aren't science. We're blessed. We get to hire the best. We get to have, they have amazing mentors. So it's a great place for our kids to be.
Okay. Now I got one more strange one I just thought of.
Okay, one more. I'll give you one more.
Okay. And this is the times we're in, and we're all suffering from it right now. It'll be over in a week. All right, we all know. The thing that really sticks with me, I was taught about the form of our government in the United States. We have both parties now claiming that they're going to save the democracy. We're not a democracy. What do we teach here? Do we teach we're a democracy, or do we teach what we really are? Because
Dr. John, I can take that.
So Amy's on our board, and she teaches in a neighboring district, and we're all the same standards. Yeah.
So it's under the same standards. I teach both regular government and advanced placement government, as well as a dual enrollment class for Kenyon College that is a political science 200 class. Yes, we are a republic. However, to try not to get too far into the weeds with this, we are a representative democracy. Our founding fathers did not have another terminology for representative democracy. To them, democracy was majoritarian rule, 50% plus one gets whatever they want. We have majority rule with minority rights, and we have representation, and that is called a representative democracy. So we are a democracy. It is what I tell my students, that's the vehicle in which we use to be a republic. Does that help?
that's different than what I learned. I was taught we were a constitutional representative republic.
Well, yes, technically, but all those terms mean representative democracy.
Right, and we were taught the branches and all of those kind of things. So I just hope, it sounds like we are. I just want to.
Yeah, that's part of our curriculum too. And the curriculum's public. You can see the government curriculum on our website and see exactly what is taught in each of those
Great.
classes.
Anyone else? Okay. Thank you. I love it when you guys come. I love the conversations. Thank you.
We are.
All right, thank you. We are going to go ahead and do Board of Education committees. I think we have a few updates since we delayed that from last meeting. Who wants to jump in first?
It sounded like Chris wanted to go.
Chris is excited.
I'll let you go. Ladies first.
Okay.
Do you want to do communications?
You could. I have two, so you can do communications. if you want.
So we met with communications, and basically we had Cassie go through the format of what they are doing and how they're getting the word out there to everybody, and all the new changes that have been happening within the communications department. And I'm looking forward to seeing some more new things. So the, now I can't remember the name of it. The 6-page, the United, that will be coming out, and also that showed us on the website how we can find all of her articles that she posts everywhere throughout the city, so everybody has access to them, and what's coming up. So very excited for communications and how they are sharing and spreading the word about everything.
I just want to add that the new In the Know series kicked off with Dr. Marshausen talking about redistricting. So that's a series of 60 to 90-second videos. I keep wanting to say minutes, but it's not minutes, it's seconds. Yeah, so check that out.
We had a city council liaison meeting, Lindsay and I did this past week. They gave us, well, I say a part of that discussion was the new metro development and everything that's going to go on over there. So attached to that discussion was what I think will be upcoming, an opportunity for members of the board to receive a presentation themselves and be able to engage in some Q&A and dialogue around what their plans are, how they may be looking towards us as a part of that partnership, similar to the Bridge Street corridor project. And this is something that is going to be done in phases. It is an extremely complex project. It's an exciting project, I think, for the city of Dublin and, for that matter, the school district, and the possibilities that it will continue to bring to our area. But that was one thing. The second thing was there's discussion around, they're doing their annual review on fees and expenses related to their facilities. And a part of that deals with swimming and our rental charges. So we've got some work to do on our end, because we also need to look at how we are currently dealing with similar sports such as bowling, where we have to have outside rentals in order to obviously make those opportunities possible for our students. So they have not increased the charges, and I think eight years is
Since 2018.
Yeah, so it's been a while. So there's definitely going to be a possibility of an increase, but we're working through that in a very open way with them. But I want to make sure I got that on your guys' radar.
We had our Senior Citizens Council meeting earlier today, and the Grizel Middle School Select Choir started off the meeting with the performance of the winter concert songs that they have. So I don't know when the concert will be, but keep an eye out for their winter concert, because it was so good. I mean, they sang a cappella the Star Spangled Banner and other songs that just were amazing. So definitely check that out. And I know I say that every time that our kids perform, but they truly are amazing. So if you have a chance to catch one of their concerts, definitely do. We also had Mayor Chris Ambrose Grooms join Dr. Marshausen and discuss some of the various ways in which the city and the district partner together. One question, because I always like to share the questions, one question that an attendee asked is if the city requires developers to do a school impact study. And the answer is no. They require traffic impact studies, green space studies, things along those lines, but not schools specifically. But the mayor did state that the city works to not negatively impact the schools. So it is something that they're very cognizant of, and you know, they definitely don't want to negatively impact us, and it is a partnership with them. The DCS preschool principal also shared an overview of the preschool, and I won't share everything that she shared, but it was a lot of good information. One of the questions that a lot of people have is, why does DCS have a preschool? Because they tend to think that it's like childcare only, which it's the answer to that question is that the district is legally required to provide services to students with disabilities from the age of 3. And an interesting piece of information that she shared is that there's been an increase in speech therapy referrals since the pandemic, and this is largely due to screens. So screen time for little ones actually changes their brains. So they've been doing training with parents on that topic. And she also discussed the benefits of having that consolidated preschool space versus having 7 different buildings. So they're able to create their own culture. They're able to create a sensory-friendly environment for our autistic students, smaller playground equipment, opportunities for teachers to collaborate, consistent curriculum, and also there's less need for duplicating resources. So instead of purchasing things for 7 different buildings. It's all housed in one building. And also, she talked about the addition, which is expected to be complete in August of 2025, which will add more classrooms, more space for therapy. Currently, they're doing therapy in the hallways and, just trying to find space. There will also be a staff lounge, which they don't currently have, and a small library for the students. And lastly, Shannon Maurer, I think, spoke to the group about the Dublin Teen Buddy program, which connects teens with seniors. And this idea for this program actually came about during COVID when a Jerome student who happens to be a student volunteer at one of the senior living centers was looking for a way to help teens and seniors combat isolation and create that sense of belonging that we were talking about with our seniors and our teens. So it's in its 5th year, and it runs September through May, and they do different activities throughout the school year. That's it.
Anyone else have any sharing? Okay, we also had key communicators for the first time virtual. That was really awesome. I think we had a fantastic turnout, and Cassie did a great job of managing expectations and where we're going, but also I think it's been a very successful rollout of the bullet point emails and that direction. Chris hit City Council. I feel like we did PTO in between there, you and I, but the months are running together. And we had SAC, which that was right the same day as our what is our author's name with Born to Be Wild? He came and talked to the students. Yeah.
Yes.
So that was fantastic. Okay, that's all I have. Student representative updates.
So since I haven't been able to be here in a while, I thought I'd reintroduce myself to the board and anyone else. I'm AJ Sanders. I'm the board representative for Scioto. And I know all the students in the district are very excited. Next Tuesday, we get off school for Election Day. I'm very excited. It will be my first election, and I will be voting, so I'm excited for that. Kaufman Theater is hosting its performance of High School Musical this weekend. They have a couple performances throughout the week, I know as well. Jerome, Tuesday, November 12th, they have Sounds of Service, a live music event that will be hosted at the school with all profits going towards the Veteran Companion Animal Services charity. And then their boys soccer won the district championship last week. At Scioto, boys soccer plays in the regional finals on Wednesday after winning districts last week, and volleyball won the district championship this past Saturday, defeating Mount Vernon, as well as the annual Powder Puff game was hosted last Monday, organized by the Purple Star Club in order to raise money for veterans and their families. And at Emerald Campus, the American Red Cross will be hosting a blood drive right here Tuesday, October 31st at Emerald. And that's it.
Wonderful. Thank you, AJ. And I think it's fantastic you're using your day off school and you're going to take the opportunity to vote.
I want to say something. I had the opportunity to see AJ perform this past weekend, and it was awesome, and you did a great job.
Thank you.
I don't know if you want to mention that program that you did.
Sorry.
No, go ahead, mention it.
Well, now we need
Where
to know.
did she see you perform?
Dublin Scioto Theater had Too Much Light Makes the Baby Go Blind this past weekend.
It was like 30 plays in what?
60 minutes.
Okay. Very cool.
And you just finished a football season, right?
Yep.
I mean,
He's not
we haven't
busy at
seen him
all.
for a while. I just don't know why.
All
Great, good.
right. Dr. Marsh.
Indian Run alum.
All right.
You take full credit.
Must be the principal.
Well, must be the principal. Dr. Marshausen.
We are in the midst of our gathering public input from elementary and middle school redistricting. Last Monday night, we had a public meeting that was attended by, we figured 325, give or take, over at Jerome High School. The maps are on the website right now, and we are taking public comment. There are 8 schools that will be affected. As board members, you're getting some comments. I'm getting a lot of comments. Trying to direct them towards Cropper GIS. All those comments will be heard, and there will be some changes to the map. Probably not drastic, but some changes to the map as Cropper goes through that. He has reviewed some information with Mr. Gill as we look at, are there any things there that can be fixed? It's sometimes unnerving and a little bit sad, the level of emotion we get in the comments. We just want everybody to know that as we look at redistricting, it is a necessity, it's not a choice. If we didn't do anything, we would have schools that already have 12 modular classrooms continue to grow, and our student population would outgain the space in those schools. We understand there are some middle school parents who are concerned with the redistricting. We can't have Eversole run over Flow. So when we have space in other schools, we have to move students to where the schools are. I recently had a conversation with a local area superintendent who asked me, what's worse, redistricting or a levy campaign? And I said, I would take redistricting every day of the week because I know next year on October 1st, everything will be fine. This is really an adult problem more than it's a kid problem, because next year, the third week in August, when those kids go to their middle schools and their elementary schools, they're going to make new friends. They're going to see that a Dublin school is a Dublin school. And by October 1st, they are going to be fine. If you don't pass a levy, that's not always true. So, yeah, this is kind of rough right now, but we know it's all going to be fine because our kids will be fine. We ask adults for patience and grace, and we ask everyone to know this is what happens when you're a growing district. Growth doesn't happen in a balanced way across the district. So we work through all of these challenges. And folks, and I said this on stage last week, we're going to do this again in 3 or 4 years because it's growing that fast. So we're going to have to get good at this over the next decade or so. When you look at what are the priorities, and Mr. Valentine's been on the board the longest, but I think everybody here has had children go through the district. We really believe in neighborhood and small elementary schools. It's the foundation and the start of a Dublin education. If we were going to do things for purely efficiency, we would have made Bishop Elementary 1,500 kids. But our goal is 600 to 800 kids in an elementary school. And our goal is 4 sections. And in an elementary school with 4 sections of each grade level, chances are you're going to be in school 1 or 2 years with everybody who's in your class there. And those cohorts are going to be mixed up over the course of 6 years in an elementary school. And from a research standpoint, we know this is what's best. 2,000 student elementaries don't have the same feel that we have. Our principals know all of our kids' names. Our teachers talk about kids. It's one of the reasons when Dave asks about what do we do to help kids grow emotionally, we do it naturally by our setup. The next part of those smaller neighborhood elementaries is trying to keep them together when they go to middle school. Right now we have 3 elementaries that get divided to go to middle schools, and right now the other 11 don't get broken up. Next year when we go to 15 elementaries, there are 3 elementaries that the students out of elementary get divided, and those are Penny, Depp, and Bailey. All of the other ones now are direct feeds. So that cohort gets to stay together when they make the jump. I wish we could make it so none of them got divided. But that proximity and continuity is one of the things that's really important for us. We also need to balance utilization and try to get this as far ahead in the future as we can. When you look at the Cropper reports, we try to get all those buildings in the northwest down below 100% and into the 80%, knowing that the next year they'll be right back up. So where's the growth, and can we put the growth in areas that they can be absorbed so we don't have to do this again immediately? That's important. And then we also have efficiency and safety. Where are the bus routes? Where can we have students walk? We would never want to assign kids who can walk to Glacier and assign them to another building. Because if you can walk to your school, one, you can walk, and two, it saves us money. There's an efficiency portion there. So as we look at all this, this is all taken into account. It's not one approach, it's not one thing that we look at. It's all of these things are part of the priorities that we look at when we see who's going to go where and what's this going to be like. Some of the things that we do now will be changed again in 3 or 4 years, and we just know that. And part of that will depend on, as we look at master facility plans, is it elementary 16 and middle school 6? What does that look like? Is it a 4th high school? Is it additions on all 3 of the high schools? The work we're doing with Scioto now, and we haven't started that redistricting process yet, the work that we'll be doing at Scioto allows for 3 balanced high schools now in terms of size, which opens doors and conversations down the road and in the future. So all of these things are taken into account, but I think the most important message is this just has to happen. We don't have enough seats. We're opening a new elementary school, and we've got room at Sells to have more kids there, so we're going to have to move kids there. Along those lines, and Mr. Kern is going to talk about the 5-year forecast this evening, Lori and her team have been working with our guidance counselors to run mock schedules for 2025-26. And thanks to Mr. Gill and our counselors, we're building those mock schedules using last year's scheduling requests. Are there more efficient ways for us to build a schedule that allows us, one, to integrate this building better and allow students to take advantage of Emerald Campus and the work that we're doing here? So they're playing in the sandbox, is what we like to call it, on schedules to see what does it look like. Maybe it's not a 7-period day. Maybe it's an 8-period day. Maybe it's a 15-period day. What does that look like in terms of a schedule? The next step is when we bring middle school folks in later this week to do the same thing and play in the sandbox. There are very few times that I issue specific expectations. This is one of them. I want all 3 high schools to be on the same schedule. I want all 5 middle schools to be on the same schedule, and I need the high school schedules to work with Emerald Campus. So as we look at this, these are all kind of parameters that we've set forward. And then finally, Mr. Boney has the interest form for any of our teachers who are certified to go to Bishop Elementary. And that will go out in early December, close before the holiday break, so that starting in January, when Lucas Bauer officially becomes the principal of Bishop, he'll have those interest forms and he'll be able to interview those people who would like to go to Bishop before we go then through the process of, if not enough people want to go there, how do we get people to Bishop so that we're able to staff that building, and what does that look like? I can't say enough about our partnership with Donna and DEA. Everybody knows this is coming, and we're talking about it. We're transparent in these conversations. And all I can say is we're going to do it better than we did when we opened Eversole, Depp, and Hopewell. I've been a superintendent now for 20 years. I've never seen a new building opened well when it comes to staffing, because it's always a challenge to create a culture with a leader and bring those folks together so that that first year goes smoothly. We're getting better at this, so I think we might have a shot this time. So I'm excited about the work that we're doing there. Whoops. Okay, before I go to Cassie, anybody have questions for me on redistricting, scheduling, all of that stuff that we have going on?
This is a very random question. And Jeff, you were just because I'm looking at this map, is there going to be any walkway attachment from that parking lot over to Jerome?
Not right away.
Okay.
So we have the new elementary we'll have walkways surrounding the whole area.
Yep.
And the reason we didn't start with any walkways yet by Jerome is because the way it's zoned, there'd be we would have to work with the city a little bit, and we didn't want to attach that with elementary 15 because of scheduling and
Slowing it down,
occupancy.
yeah.
But that is coming down the line. We're probably going to start looking at it next summer when we're doing the asphalt project. We're going to see what needs to be done, because we're going to be redoing all the pathways then. We'll start to work with the city then.
Okay, awesome.
So it'll be very close.
Ultimately, our goal is to have visitor parking for events at Bishop and a ticket gate for visitors and a way for them to get in from that side, because parking at Jerome events can be a bit of a challenge. So with the city's help, that's one of the things. And then when you think about where we're going to put the next turfed field, what does that look like too in terms of providing access? So Jeff and his team have a lot on their plate. Working with P&Z can be a challenge, so we want to make sure we get this building open first. Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong while we're looking at this, and this is totally off subject. Their biggest challenge now is getting power to that building, because all the electric guys are down in the Carolinas helping with the hurricanes and the damage down there. So we're still running generators there.
No, we are hooked up with power after we attached it to Jerome.
Okay.
So unfortunately, to meet our timeline, the power company was unable to give us a new line there. So we are attached to Jerome, and we had some antics that when we hooked it up was the first week of school, but all's well that ends well type of thing. But we are now running with Jerome. So if the Jerome's good, elementary 15's good.
All right. Good evening. I have set at each of your tables a copy of the athletic playbook and the safety and wellness playbook as promised. I just wanted to show these documents to you. It did take quite a bit of collaboration to put these together and a lot of time, and we're really proud of them. The athletic playbook was created by the athletic directors with Mike Ulring leading that process, and then I helped write and design it. And then the safety and wellness playbook was a collaboration between myself, Chuck Collier, and Rebecca Myers, who is the public information officer for the city and the Dublin PD. And then the chief and several of our SROs and the deputy chief all also helped. We kind of sat in a room together, much like we are right now, and kind of, put some stuff on paper and went through and have created this. So the most important thing to me in here, obviously as the communications person, is the communication piece. But it does have for our parents a nice kind of visual for the words that we use in our district when there is some type of emergency situation. And one of the things we commonly run into is that parents can get these confused, and they can think that when a building is on a hold, that kind of says that there's a security situation or a safety situation in the building. And that's not always the case. Sometimes we go on a hold for like a medical emergency, which is still a safety incident, but it only involves one child and it's relatively contained. And so what happens is kids will text home, we're on lockdown, even though they're not really on lockdown. And so we're going to try, and the city's going to try, that when there is situations that we need to communicate out, we're going to be very consistent in the language. So our communications, if the school is on a hold, we'll say hold. If the school's on a lockdown, they will say lockdown. The city has these graphics, copies of the color coding. They are incorporating them into the graphics that they will put on Nextdoor and any of the social media places in which they would share if there was an urgent situation going on. So we have aligned in that way, which I don't know that that's been done before. So we're kind of trying to set a precedent of trying to align and make sure our communications and what you're hearing from us and what you're hearing from Dublin PD are the same. And then we're also sharing this with other first responders as well. So we have emailed it to City of Columbus Police. We've emailed it to PAL, to Washington Township. Anybody, all the municipalities have a copy of it as well, so that they know how we would handle a safety incident here.
I just want to say thank you for your work and to everyone who, had a hand in putting both of these together. There's a lot of good information in here, and it's really important information also. But I want to point out that when I first saw these, I thought they're kind of long, and that maybe people wouldn't, pick them up to read because they are kind of long. But they're not actually long reads; they're quick reads, and they're very well put together. So thank you.
Yeah, we tried, there's a lot of information. We tried to chunk and hunk it, right? Which is like an elementary term that I'm learning as I spend a lot of time with teachers. So we did try to really create chapters and kind of shorten things so that people could go by topic. And then we have a communication plan to try to share like a chapter each time. So we introduced the Safety and Wellness Playbook in Inside DCS, the e-newsletter that went out yesterday. And then with each monthly newsletter, we will focus on a specific chapter so that people, if they don't have the physical copy, because we only printed so many copies per building, but this information will be embedded in a newsletter as we go throughout. I know that the athletic playbook is covered at all of the sports meetings with the coaches, so the parents get a thorough overview at it. They don't necessarily get a choice because they're stuck with the coach in the meeting, and they get to go through that. But for the district, because the Safety and Wellness Playbook applies to everyone, we'll be embedding chapters. But you're right, it's a lot, but I think it's good, and I think people will find value in it.
Thank you. Mr. Kern.
Sorry there. We have a few things on the agenda before I'll get into a quick presentation of the 5-year forecast. We do have approval of transfers. This is, we're at Kaufman, there's some dormant clubs over there, and this is kind of getting rid of those funds that still exist in those funds and transferring them to active funds, for example, the class of 26, 27, and 28 and stuff like that. So that's one thing on the agenda. We have our annual junior varsity hockey reimbursement agreement. Jerome Boosters will agree for coaches for the JV reimburse us up to $7,000. And then we also have the September financial report. As you can see, we're online with expectations at this point of the year, as we're just starting the year out. This does align with the 5-year forecast and the estimates that you'll see this evening as you go forward. So just a reminder as we do that. So is there any questions on the other stuff? If not, I will jump into the approval of the 5-year forecast in the presentation. I'm going to sit down this time, Cassie, if you... Thank you. 5-year forecast. All right. Well, as we know, we do the start every time, but this is legislatively required. We do this twice a year, once by the end of November. And so as we are early this year in October, it used to actually be due by the end of October, but then they figured out, well, people have levies on in November, and we want to update our 5-year forecast for after that, so they made a requirement November. But we are going early. We work hard. We are constantly reviewing this document and going through it and the assumptions as we go through the year, as we see stuff that comes out throughout the year. But also, as we are issuing debt to do the Scioto edition, we just had our bond rating meeting last Friday with S&P, which used to be Standard & Poor's for anyone who remembers that. Dr. Marshausen, myself, Mr. Valentine, Tyson, Dr. Schwanke, herself, went through that meeting with S&P along with our financing group of professionals there, and I think it went really well. As you know, we've been AAA rated with S&P for quite some time. Not much has really changed with the last time we were with them, which was January, so that is good news. Our 5-year forecast actually looks a little better since then, so that is a plus through that. Now, the one thing that I just will caveat with that, in case something we do not get a AAA, is S&P has changed their rating criteria and how they do that. And so that may or may not affect our current rating, but that is something that is out there that could have a potential effect. Which I always think, I'm gonna have one offhand comment here. They worry about our 5-year forecast a lot, but that doesn't pay the debt that we're actually issuing. We actually have a bond retirement fund that we work with the county auditor to make sure that they assess enough taxes so we meet our annual debt requirements. But at the end of the day, they want the whole picture of the school district. And it's a good story to tell. We're always proud to tell what's going on at the district, whether it's education or finances. But a lot has to do with that. And then, of course, they have good questions about our growth, which we've hit on tonight, and different things with redistricting and so forth. So anyway, so to the 5-year forecast, we are required to do it twice a year, and we'll have an update, as we always do, by May 31st. This is the 5-year forecast is what we know as of today and the assumptions that we have done out there. We use this as it's a very good, like I said, we use this all the time, and it's a management tool for us. And it's not just for our treasurer's office and our staff, but it's also working with our cabinet level, working with our departments that are out there, and trying to planning document for the district as we go forward and with this, and use this information to make decisions. Now, it's not the be-all, end-all. As you farther go out in the forecast, things change in 5 years. You know, we have a couple state budgets coming up and different other things that could change. Different legislative ideas could be out there, whether it's through real estate taxes or whatever it could be. But it's at that moment that we have these assumptions that we make the best. And I will say, as we go forward, I think as you look at our financial reports as we end the year, we're typically within 1% of our estimates. So we feel pretty good about this as a tool that we can use going forward. Key line items. We divide it into revenues and expenditures. Revenue is made up mostly, main source is real estate tax funding, and the expenditures are mainly salaries and benefits, as they both essentially make up 85% of the revenues and expenditures on those sides. General fund revenue sources, as you can see, we've already talked about. 85% of our revenue is from real estate taxes. And the other, we have very little from the state, 14.7% from the state, and some of that is even made up what they call homestead and rollback, which is their local taxpayer gets a break on their taxes that is reimbursed through the state to us on old levies. Any levy that's been passed, I think, since 2016 or so. I know our last two haven't qualified for the rollback and occupancy. So. They do not get it on those new levies. So we essentially get 9% from state foundation funding, which it was a shame, as we have residents who pay a lot of state taxes that seem to go everywhere else except for Dublin City Schools, unfortunately. When they used to have this on the old CUP report, they have now since taken it off because districts like us and Olentangy and different other districts have used this information. They no longer list it. They used to have sources of how much you get back on each dollar your residents pay in state income tax for each dollar. We were always around 13 cents. The statewide average was around 70-some cents. So as you can tell, there is some districts that get over $1 back from each issue. So my joke always is, and I always love telling this one, is I wouldn't be here if I could get those type of returns. I'd be on Wall Street running my own hedge fund. Doing those type of things, but unfortunately that's the way it works. They see us as a income and property wealth school district. Here's our sources of revenues. We talked about wages and benefits as they're going forward there. They do make up predominantly as we're a service industry. We're here about teaching and learning and teaching and delivering that instruction to the kids, whether it be from our teachers, to our paraprofessionals who help out in our special education, to our very needed, who the first person and the last person seen in the day is our bus drivers. And that's all taken into effect here. And then our second biggest line is our our third, I should say, purchase services, and that's where you get your utilities, our sub-services that we get through the Educational Service Center of Central Ohio and so forth. Updates to the forecast. We did add 1 year to this forecast, so you now have fiscal year 2029. So you always see that with the fall update. We do add 1 more year. We do continue to have a positive cash balance through June 30th of 2028. And as that has changed, just slightly increase from May, so that's good news. But pretty much, honestly, we are about the same as we've been before. One thing I mentioned in our board update about this is when it came to expenses, why are we having this, positive cash balance and the slight increase? Well, one of the biggest ones is the responsible staffing plan that we have implemented out there has extended that positive cash balance. And we also ended last year too, as we ended slightly better on expenditures, so that's then carries forward through the forecast. So that's kind of good news for the district. We'll continue. I know we're talking about voluntarily opening, going to the new elementary and stuff like that. Our goal and our promise is to continue to try to stay at approximately 1,430 certified staff. So we had a lot of challenges out there, but we're committed to stretching this levy and being accountable to our taxpayers out there, as we don't want to go back any sooner than we have to. Some small changes on one more change on the expenditure side of things too is our insurance increase. As you know, for calendar year, we run, while our fiscal year is July to June, our benefits year is a January, runs on a calendar year. So for this year that we're in now, calendar year 2024, we had 0% increase in health insurance premiums. Unfortunately, as we move forward through 2025, which starts January 1, you not only had inflationary increases, which in the Columbus market for healthcare is approximately 89% just every year, just in inflationary increases. And that trend data continues. And one little thing our broker told us is when you're comparing reimbursement levels, when you go to the doctor, what it costs to go to the doctor, as compared to Cincinnati and Cleveland, the Central Ohio market is 20% higher in cost, in provider cost, the district, whether it's at the hospital level, which is at your PCP, is generally 20% higher than the other big metro areas in the state of Ohio. So it's a challenge. But we are increasing about 8.7% 2025. We had actually estimated 9 because we know that trend data is there. I give credit to, within our bargaining agreements, we have what's called the insurance committee. So it's representatives from both DEA and DSA, but also administration. And we also did make some additional plan design changes that not only helped this year's and keep the increase while we still had an increase, but keep it from being larger. I think will have positive effects as we move forward into future years in trying to maintain as best we can or control the cost of health insurance. So that's what's going on out there from an expense side of things. On the revenue side of things, and Tyson reminded me this when we were just kind of putting this presentation real quick together, putting the slides, is I mentioned this in the spring, is one of the things we were looking at is real estate revenue collections seem to be down for first half taxes as people can pay all in the first half. And typically what you see is what we call, at that time we called it the split. So typically you'll see about 52% of your taxes come in the first half when your bills are typically, if you're in Franklin County, due in January. And when your second half, which your bills due typically around June, you get about 52% in first half and 48% because some people go ahead and just pay the whole thing for the year. We noticed that seemed to not match up with what we had estimated. And as we went through and got second half data and everybody's collections came in, our actual collection percentage was down ever so slightly. So the last 2 previous years, we've had 99.75 and 99.5% of collections. And this year, for this tax year 2023 and collection year 2024, as that there again runs on a calendar year basis, we had 97.2%. So not, when the rating agencies are looking at that, that doesn't alarm them. Yes, is it a little bit of a change? Yes, and unfortunately that collection is down a little bit. So we did change our estimates from about 99.5 or 99.75% down to 98.5 for the next couple of years. The way property taxes work, we'll get it eventually. If someone doesn't pay their taxes over time, they may have to, unfortunately, sell their home or whatever, but we'll get those collections. We've seen this before. This is during the Great Recession, we saw a little bit, delinquencies up a little bit. Then you eventually get probably 2 to 3 years down the line, you'll get that 101, 102% collections as delinquencies and late payments get caught up. So we'll get it, but right now that we've changed our estimates based off what we've seen. So from a property tax perspective in real estate, those are down ever so slightly as you compare it to May. And one last thing is AEP. Actually had a decrease in some value in the public utility personal property tax, or public tax as we call it. Of about 500, it resulted in the value decrease, resulted in about a $560,000 decrease. So that's been incorporated into this forecast with that lower value going forward. Now we do get slight growth every year on that, so eventually we'll catch back up with the value that we lost there. But that is something that's been incorporated in this forecast. And there again, I'd like to take a shout out to our Franklin County. As soon as we saw it, we asked them what it is, and they were able to send us the exact tax properties that they were, and so they knew exactly what things that led to that big decrease. This is a run rate chart that I like to call as we continue, as you see the chart between revenues and expenditures. Revenues remain relatively flat as expenditures continue to grow between inflationary increases and any other, whether it's utilities, whether it's health insurance, whether it's wage increases. And then you can see the ending cash balance as that continues to go down as we talk about, as we do actually go into the negative at this point in 2029. We're talking about that. Ending cash balance, our informal policy is 1 to 2 months of cash balance at the end of the levy cycle. You can see in 2028, we're in that sweet spot of 1 to 2 months. We talk about efficiencies as we continue to go through, or whether it's through scheduling or whatever it may be. If we can continue to get that 2029 up as we move forward, we're conservative, right? We're conservative in our estimating. Typically, we come out better on the revenues and expenditure side, so that's one thing that could help add to that cash balance. But also, too, in staffing, as we continue to go through and continue with a responsible staffing plan, and if we can do more and be more efficient, may add to that 2029 cash balance. So, really, in conclusion, I think I really went through everything there. We talk about some things that put pressure on us. As you said, we continue with growth of new students and the need of those students and their instruction, and new buildings and responsible staffing plan. Everything's out there is kind of what's going on. But I think I've hit everything there. I mean, state budget, we are in the second year of the 2-year biennium budget, so we'll get to that process here January. I think the governor will have to come out with his new budget, and we'll see how that process goes. That usually goes down to about June 29th or June 30th, and there's been years, Dr. Marshausen, I think we've gone all the way till, August, I think, one year? About 6 years ago, I think. So
they had to do a temporary for 1 year where they had to pass, so we had some money.
Yep. Yeah, it got us through September, I think, that year or something. So we'll go through that process, and we'll advocate. We want more than 13 cents back for us, but that's, like I said, it's an uphill climb. We'll continue to work on that, but that's the way they see us with that, going for the state budget. But other than that, ESSER funds, one last thing on ESSER funds, those have been completely spent. We used as much as we could for that to help out our general fund. Chromebooks was a big one where it saved our general fund, where we were able to push some of those expenses for a few years over to ESSER, where we got for our one-to-one initiatives with our students in the middle school and high school. We were able to push that over. Now that's back in our budget, general fund budget from ESSER funding, and so that's been incorporated. And I will say, we haven't, unlike some districts, and I don't know who all has, but they may have added staff and different other programs to ESSER that they have no idea how to pay for, and that's something we did not do. We didn't have any continuing costs coming out of ESSER that we used ESSER funds for. One of the big things we did use is our virtual school that we did use, but that has been sunset, so we are no longer using those funds for that. So that's all I have for this evening. Any questions from anybody?
So, Brian, just to carry on to the ESSER funds, I just want to make sure I'm understanding you, that the ESSER monies that we have allocated, you don't anticipate anything, we don't have an ongoing big budget item that will now fall into the general fund now that the ESSER funds are depleted.
You are correct.
Correct?
There is
Okay.
nothing.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to add, together with the previous board, we were very strategic about that decision as well, which I think gives kudos to the folks that came before, the folks who are currently here, that we made sure we didn't put ourselves in that position.
And Diana, when I talked about the Chromebooks, those were previously in our general fund. We were already doing that, but this was a way to help our general fund out and a little cost relief to our operating fund there was to move it to ESSER for a few years, and then now it's back into our fund, just like it was planned all along, so.
I have a question, and you can, email me if it's easier than answering it right now. But in your report, you wrote that we are currently under the funding formula, but we're close to guarantees. Can you explain that?
Yeah, so when the funding formula there's always, it's always an up and down thing, right? We are a district that's been on guarantees forever, meaning you're going to get X amount of money. So where other districts are actually on the formula based off, I've always called it a distribution method. They figure out who's going to get what, and we're just going to back into it from a calculation perspective. So Dublin, you're not going to get very much. Here's how we're going to back into it. So there. So one of the things is, and part of it's called the Fair School Funding Plan, is it hasn't been fully funded yet and implemented. So until that happens, we are kind of stuck where we're at with that, and we're close to being on and off the formula. Because with our growth, we're actually adding students, so we may actually be on the formula at some points too. It's just depending on where everybody else is in the state as well.
But it doesn't mean it's a windfall for us.
No. It may mean a few extra bucks, but it's not going to be a windfall. Even when they fully fund this formula, it is not going to be a windfall for our district. We may get small growth, whether it's 5% or something on that, which we're thankful for anything extra that we can get. It's just we're always, any formula that's ever been out there, we get penalized because we're seen as a high income and high property wealth district.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kern. If there are no more questions, it is recommended by the treasurer that the Board of Education approve items 5B through 5E. Is there a motion?
So moved.
So moved by Mrs. Messick, second by Mr. Valentine. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Messick?
Yes.
Mr. Valentine?
Yes.
Mrs. De Silva?
Yes.
Mrs. Rigby?
Yes.
And Mrs. Gillis?
Yes, motion passes 5-0.
Mrs. Gillis, may I for just a moment?
Yeah.
For our board members, as we talk about implementing the responsible staffing plan, our goal is to stay off the ballot until 28. And when we look at the 5-year forecast that you just approved, it's to stay off the ballot until 28. And kudos to Mrs. Marple and Mr. Boney and Dr. Schwanke and Mrs. O'Connor as we look at what does this mean to stay at that magic 1430 as we move forward. It means taking care of our staff who's here. But when we look at some of our class numbers, and we've had this conversation in STAC, and some of you have heard this conversation, with an average middle school class right or below 20, and then you look at that going to targets of 24, we're going to be asking more of our folks who are here to stay off the ballot. So as we hear these conversations, I just want to be mindful that the goal is to stay off the ballot till 28. And we said this on the call with S&P last Friday. There aren't too many districts who the day after they pass a levy start talking about how we're going to curb spending and try to keep staffing at the same level even as we're growing. But that is because our voters spoke pretty clear without shooting us down that if you come back again, there's going to be some resistance. So I thank you as a board for your support as we go through this, and our team and our teachers, because this is a little bit more of a lift. And unfortunately, it's the way we're funded from the state. We can control what we can control, and right now this is something we control, and Mr. Kern and I will continue to advocate for a more fair redistribution of our tax dollars, because in Dublin, from our perspective, it's not fair. And as we have these conversations, we'll keep going. But I thank you for your support as a board, and Mr. Kern for all of his work as this 5-year forecast isn't easy. And just like last year, now that it's approved, this is our marching orders to try to stay off the ballot until 28 and get back on a presidential cycle, but also stretch this as long as we can. So thank you to the 5 of you for your support of that effort.
Thank you, Dr. Marshausen. Reports from Department of Academics and Student Learning.
Okay, I'm going to toss the baton right over to, I believe Mrs. Marple is first, to talk a little bit about how we as a district are acknowledging and preparing for the continuing emergence of AI.
Thank you, Dr. Schwanke. Good evening, Board of Education. Tonight I get the pleasure of sharing some work that's happening as far as staff professional development around artificial intelligence. This work really started last year. Kathy Parker-Jones, one of our coordinators, has been spent last school year with a work team at secondary, really thinking in emergent ways about what we were starting to see around AI. From that study group, Kathy came in front of our principals this summer, organizing a 4-part learning series for our staff that's being rolled out at the pace that every building needs. They can choose their pace. We're recommending an essential question for each quarter as they really think about AI literacy and implementation in an attempt to level set as a staff about some of the emerging technologies that we're seeing. So I want to read for you a statement that is floating out there among Dublin City Schools teachers on some guidelines. Artificial intelligence tools can be used for productivity, communication, teaching, learning, and more. The capabilities of artificial intelligence are constantly evolving, and staff should understand the opportunities and risks associated with using AI. Dublin City Schools recognizes that responsible uses of AI will vary depending on the context, such as classroom activities and assignments. So this work started this summer. If you look at the graphic on the screen, if we start in the upper left, you'll see a first essential question really around AI literacy, and buildings were encouraged to study that question this fall. In order to study the question, Kathy has been working closely with our media specialists, really working to tool the media specialists up as a key building expert in AI. And that might sound scary to some of our media specialists because they're learners in this too. But it fits with what they do as media specialists in our buildings. And we really want to utilize our staff so that they can collaborate around the topics and the questions that you see on the screen. So you can see the 4 areas that throughout this year buildings will be exploring. In the upper left, there's one about AI literacy, and then as you go clockwise around the graphic, you can see the next one is relating to teaching and learning, and then below that, academic integrity, and then also usage guidelines. And the goal is that by the end of the year, staff in our buildings will have an introduction to really thinking about the applicable use of artificial intelligence, both as professionals and how they can use the tool, but also thinking about what language they can use with students in setting clear expectations on the front end. AI is very quickly being incorporated into so much that it's going to be important that our students understand when they're using AI and when they're not using AI, when it's appropriate to use AI and when it's not appropriate to use AI. And it's equally important for our adults to understand that as well. So we're excited about this work. We know it's necessary. It's just one tiny little piece of the learning that our teachers do on a regular basis outside of their content area, but very applicable to what they do in the classroom. Does the board have any questions?
I just have a question about, so there are various forms of AI, right? And they're constantly evolving, changing every day. And obviously, there's money that goes behind the AI platforms that are being developed. And that money can cause what you're seeing through your search to be affected. So I just wanted to know how Dublin is preparing for that to give students, a truly balanced look at different platforms.
Absolutely. Well, student safety is really important in this as well. So AI platforms aren't just open in district for any student to use any platform. We as a district are actually working with something called Magic School, which has a lot of protections in place and provides a safe environment for students to try out different tools and teachers to try out different tools that are related and built specifically for the academic environment. So that's one thing. But I think with a broader lens, you're talking about something that I would call information literacy in general. And we have multiple places throughout our curriculum that will evolve and adapt as we see AI infiltrate different forms of communication, right, across the world, really. And so that's something we're constantly looking at, watching, and trying to evolve to make sure that when kids are doing research, for example, or even spell checking, that they know what is really happening in the background, and it's tricky. So I think our organization is dedicated to learning and being practical, but also safe in how we approach this with our students.
Can you say a little bit about the third bullet point under the second question, knowledge detection, not AI detection?
Yes. So I think, and we're still doing this learning as a team, that's leaning on the idea of, are we just checking to see if kids have understanding, right? Or just that they used AI. So when we start to get into this idea of plagiarism, it's a little tricky, right? When is it okay to use AI to support your understanding versus replace your understanding?
With that, do the teachers have any tools that they have access to detect when students have used AI?
So yes, we have a few tools in place. Actually, the best example I can share is our IB students. So International Baccalaureate actually requires students to run their papers through AI detection before that they submit it. And actually what it does is it tells the student where there could be possible plagiarism so that they get a chance then to go back and make corrections before submitting their extended essays. So there's really, across the board, all sorts of different things. It's more complex at a high school, as you know, than at an elementary, where students aren't really using the same kinds of tools.
I think this is a good time, too, if I may mention Senate Bill 29, that if you've been reading about it, this is a law that requires us to either not monitor student usage or student keystrokes and activities on school-issued devices, or if we do, notify parents. And so when we think about some of that software that Mrs. Marple just mentioned, there's a little bit of a conflict in the law as it's written right now about that. So we are trying to figure out two things at the same time: how to allow for academic freedom and limit monitoring, and teach our students about appropriate use of AI. There's a lot of conversations in the literary world about how someday, you know, it used to be a copyright, the little C, how we might soon see indications of, for example, 100% author created or hybrid created with author and AI, so that you can see something and know what it is. Of course, that's almost impossible to police or monitor. So we're doing a lot with this. I thank Kelly Ram, hiding over there, for really being on the front end of Senate Bill 29 and what it means for us as a district.
Thanks, Jen. All right, I will pass it on to Mr. Andrus.
No AI was used in my portion of tonight. Special education is all about the individual student. And, you know, we create systems and processes and procedures and learning environments to operationalize our mission and to give our staff a foundation on which to serve their students. And what we've created here in Dublin meets the needs of many of our students with disabilities. The better we execute our plan, the more student needs can be met in our system. But please don't be fooled. There is no perfect system that efficiently and effectively meets the needs of every child with a disability. And that's where the IEP team comes into play. They ensure the unique needs of a child with a disability are considered and addressed so that child can make meaningful educational progress. So tonight I just want to share some information on changes that have been made at Tolles and the impact those changes have had on students with disabilities here in Dublin. While planning my remarks tonight, I did use Google to find a quote that summarizes my opinion of the situation that's happening here. And that quote is, "A perfect plan is only as good as its execution. Often the best ideas fall apart when faced with the complexities of reality." Over the past 4 years, the percentage of full-day students with disabilities at Tolles has gone from about 75% down to about 25%, meaning the percentage of half-day students has gone from about 25% up to 75%. Now, during that time, the number of students with disabilities that attend Tolles has doubled from almost 50 to about 100. On the surface, that may appear like a positive thing, but that's where the quote, I think, is appropriate in regards to execution and the complexities of reality. So half-day Tolles students, they lose a period in their day when they travel back to their home high school. And this makes it difficult to ensure that all of their services are delivered and that they meet the stringent graduation requirements. When only a small number of students were half-day and Tolles provided special education support in their labs, this was manageable. But with so many more students half-day and less special education support at Tolles, it really is a challenge for our kids. Most half-day students now receive no special education support at Tolles, meaning we have 100% of services to provide in 3 periods, which is effectively 36% of their day. If these students need support from an intervention specialist at Tolles, they're expected to leave their lab and go to the Learning Resource Center to get that support. And that's a difficult choice for a child to make, and often one that would fall to an IEP team. And this leads to another concern. And this is a change. Half-day students no longer have a Tolles intervention specialist or lab instructor to attend those important IEP meetings to provide valuable insights into this, again, big part of their day. Instead, the team gets a brief report on their grades and their attendance from an individual that may not know the student. As lab sizes go up to accommodate the increased enrollment at Tolles, we've seen our half-day students receiving less support and not making the progress that we've seen in the past. In Dublin, we have 1 intervention specialist for approximately every 16 students on IEPs. It was recently shared with me that Tolles has increased the number of students with disabilities from 190 to 345 over the past 4 years. And we're happy that those students now have access to attend Tolles. It was also shared that in order to meet this higher demand, Tolles added 2 intervention specialists, taking their total from 6 to 8. Or a ratio of 1 intervention specialist for every 43 students on IEPs. We appreciate the increased investment from tolls, but it is possible that 2 additional ISs for 155 students with disabilities may not meet the unique needs of those students. We understand that at the end of the day, and tolls has been sure to remind us of this, that special education services and costs are ultimately the responsibility of the district of residence. This means that when a student's special education needs are not met at tolls, the home district provides the services and absorbs those costs. Because each child is different, it's challenging to capture exact costs, but we can create some general estimates. We appreciate the offer from tolls for further discussion and clarification around this complicated issue. We have voiced our concerns over the past few years, and unfortunately, we've still arrived at this challenging situation. We will continue to share our concerns from both a broad programming perspective and also those from individual children with disability and their situations. And hopefully, as the largest district at tolls, they'll listen to our feedback and enhance their new model and systems to meet the needs of more students with disabilities. The great part about this is I believe that we do have a common goal with tolls, and that goal is not that students with disabilities simply have an opportunity to attend tolls, but that each individual student with a disability has the opportunity to succeed at tolls. Thank you.
Any questions? Okay, thank you.
I don't have any questions, but that was a lot. Thank you for the food for thought, and I think I'll probably email you. This is obviously an ongoing battle here, so I don't want to feel, you said all of that with passion and facts, and so I don't want it to just be like, oh, thanks, we didn't listen to you. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. Okay.
Real quick, just to jump in on that. Obviously, we've had some email dialogue on this, and there's been some conversations. And
Yes.
This goes back many years when we talk about the amount of money that our taxpayers inevitably are diverting to tolls. And even Dr. Hoadley, who's now at tolls, at one point led a charge on the financial side of this because of the number of students that we send there versus the amount of money that is going there. And this takes nothing away from, I don't think anybody is in any form or fashion taking anything away from the programming and the opportunities that are offered at tolls, but this is one of another set of issues that is really come along. And from a historical standpoint, like we've tried to navigate this with the state legislature. We've tried to talk through time with leadership, whether or not it's our leadership and the leadership that was at tolls at that time. And I can tell you in my 20 years, really nothing has changed. So I don't know where this is going. I know that this obviously puts a strain on our students, and I think it's important that we continue to shed light for our taxpayers on what this means financially, as well as to what our families have come to know and expect from receiving a Dublin education and what they're used to getting in terms of their IEP services and all that our staff is able to provide. So I don't know what the next step on this conversation is. I know that there's been dialogue, and Dr. Marshausen's at the tip of the spear on engaging that conversation, but it's something that I think we as a board owe to the students first and foremost, and then almost as equally, obviously, our taxpayers to ensure that we're doing all that we can.
I think there are two different conversations here, Mr. Valentine. One of them is the special education conversation and a meeting to talk about how we serve our students with special needs and the concerns we have that some of the programming that Tolls has is perfect for our students, but we're creating an imperfect system by not being able to provide all of those services while they're there. I think the second conversation is larger, and you're right, when I was in my previous capacity and Dr. Hoadley was here, we had many conversations that there are 7 members on the Tolls board, yet 2 districts provide 84% of the funding for Tolls. and the way the career tech districts were drawn, at the time they were drawn, Dublin and Hilliard were similar in size to West Jeff and London. They were smaller villages, not cities. And as you look at the valuation, Dublin alone is, I believe, 41% of the valuation for tolls. And that's funded by our taxpayers. So we could go back to our earlier conversations about representation and probably go back to the Great Compromise, where you look at big states versus small states. There's equal representation at tolls, but not equal funding. And that's a conversation that we've got a lot of legacy issues in Ohio as parts of the state have grown and other parts haven't. So I think that's an ongoing conversation. The other part of this, and I'm proud to sit on Governor DeWine's Executive Workforce Board, is career tech's changing. And as we look at an MOU that Tolls' board is considering now that will be sent to us, some of the things that are coming our way, we can do in-house. And we're going to have to strike a balance between traditional career tech programs that we don't want to compete with tolls over. And then there are other programs, some of the medical programs, we can all be offering it because we can't get enough nurses, nursing assistants, people into the medical pipeline. When we look at some of the technical programs and the partnerships that our BAC in Dublin is able to create, we can do it without tolls. And folks like Dave Stewart and I can have conversations. There are some things that we can do on the 270 corridor between our districts that students would jump at the opportunity to do, but they may not want to drive from Scioto to Plain City. So I think there are multiple layers to a really complex situation that we're going to have to break into bite-sized pieces. Part of it is probably a sit down with our leadership and Mr. Melody. There was a time when one of the five of you would sit on Tolls' board. And probably around 2013, 14, that changed, where we could appoint someone from our community to be the Tolls board member. Mr. Melody still represents us on the Tolls board. I think that's a conversation that would likely be had. And then the second is a meeting with Mr. Andrus and our team and the Tolls leadership. And we're going to have to break this up and continue to have these conversations.
Thank you. So ongoing conversations. That takes us to human resources. Or I'm just kidding. Department of Operations. Sorry, Mr. Stark. Didn't mean to say you.
I don't have anything for approval, but just a few comments. One of them, we have brand new doors here. Did you notice we have two brand new doors here? And that's so, when we shut those doors and people are here to celebrate, we can still hear Human Resources Update, which is always very enjoyable and important. So that's one of the main reasons we did that. I'd also like to put out there that we have many public bids out right now. So that's why I have nothing today. But come November and December, we hope to have lots of recommendations. We have right now published out there, we have for Davis and Cell Tracks. We have Sauda, Kaufman, Jerome turf fields at all of those were published today. Tennis courts at Jerome, Davis, Grizel, and Carr are out there. Asphalt for Jerome parking lot, and a new fire alarm for Cells. And we're not done. We have more that are going to be published over the next. There's lots of work publishing bids, dealing with the designers, our stakeholders, and then legal. The bid documents are a packet of like 100 so pages, so there's lots of coordination. So hopefully we'll have that all to you. And I'd be remiss in saying those doors back there, by the way, special thanks I want to say to two key members of our maintenance team, Eric Ward and Justin Edgington. They wanted to make sure those doors were put in without any interruption. So you just come in one weekend, and Friday you leave, and Monday you come, and they were always there. So they did a real nice job on that. On the public bids, it's a very, very busy time in the Columbus area, in the whole Central Ohio area. Today we had a public bid opening for 2 water heaters at Carr. We only had 1 bid, and it was over budget, which means we need to rebid it again. Typically, you go back 5, 6 years ago, we would have gotten a half a dozen bids for a small project like that. But because it's a small project, doesn't have that much interest with everything else going on. And we're struggling with some of the other projects we're having. So that's why there's a lot of thought into when we bid or how we bid or when we release certain bids. We're trying to work with our designers so we can get as much interest as possible to get these projects moving. We did have a successful bid opening Friday for the Jerome track, and we'll have that to you on the next board meeting as a recommendation. So that's going to be moving right along. So lots going on and lots coming to the board very soon. Thanks much.
Thank you. And now to Human Resources.
All right, good evening. My section is going to be fairly brief tonight, so I'll start with our certified agenda. And on that section, you'll see a salary change, and that salary change request is tied to the 6-period pay request as well. That's to provide additional EL support at Scioto. So if you see both of those are all connected. You'll see an addition of a substitute who's going to help us out in our gifted intervention specialist area. And then you'll see a few athletic event workers on the agenda tonight. And then the supplementals, they're primarily athletics, but there are a few that are either resignations or just corrections in that area as well. Moving on to our classified agenda, it's pretty simple. There's one resignation, one new hire, and then you'll see several salary changes in that area. And then the final section is our stipends, and there are 3 stipends. These are all for the EL Institute, and they all have a different focus. They're multi-part trainings. They're designed to help our Dublin teachers work with EL students and provide appropriate supports for students throughout their educational time in Dublin. And that concludes the HR portion tonight.
Thank you. It's recommended by the superintendent that the Board of Education approve items 9A through 9C. Is there a motion?
So moved.
So moved by Mrs. Rigby. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. De Silva. Mr. Kern, call the roll, please.
Mrs. Rigby?
Yes.
Mrs. De Silva?
Yes.
Mrs. Messig?
Yes.
Mr. Valentine?
Yes.
And Mrs. Gillis?
Yes. Motion passes 5-0. Any future agenda items?
Just to note that in November and December, our November meeting is pushed back a week due to the OSBA Capital Conference, and there's just one November meeting. And then there's just one December meeting because of the holidays at the end of the month. So we can expect a lot from Mr. Stark at those meetings as we get all these bids wrapped up and delivered to us.
All right, thank you. We are headed to executive session, so in accordance with Ohio Revised Code 121.22, the Dublin Board of Education will go into executive session to consider the employment of a public official. Is there a motion?
So moved.
So moved by Mrs. Selva. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Messick. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. De Silva?
Yes.
Mrs. Messig?
Yes.
Mrs. Rigby?
Yes.
Mr. Valentine?
Yes.
And Mrs. Gillis?
Yes. And just to note, no action will be taken after executive session, and we will adjourn the meeting.